Welcome to Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips, where we talk all things addictions, codependency, relationships, and the good, bad, and ugly in between. Hey, podcast family, it's Jess, and welcome to the Living Out Loud podcast. I have some very exciting news. My new ebook, Breaking Free, Healing from Narcissistic Abuse and Reclaiming Your Power, is officially available for download. I wrote this ebook for anyone who was raised by narcissistic or emotionally immature parents, for anyone who has suffered through the silent treatment, for anyone who was called oversensitive, or for anyone who grew up emotionally starved. I wrote this ebook for the same kids who turn into adults chasing the same type of love they were shown growing up. For individuals who find themselves in psychologically abusive relationships where they are gaslit, punished, and then find themselves begging for connection after their abusive partners pull away. I know firsthand how insane this can make you feel and the impact it can have on your mental health. And I'm here to tell you that you're not crazy and you're definitely not alone. I have poured everything I know about narcissistic abuse into this ebook, and it's packed with exercises and journal prompts to help you go from hopeless, anxious, and depressed to empowered, boundaried, and clear about who comes in or out of your life. This ebook will explain the different types of narcissists, the many ways abuse can appear, and help you set boundaries and get your confidence back. If you're ready to jump in, you can find the ebook download link in the show notes of this episode, or you can head on over to my website, www.jessphillipscoaching.com, and purchase it straight from there. And if you're looking to do more intensive one-on-one work with me live each week, you can head on over to the contact page of my website and fill out a submission form. Now, let's get back to the show. Welcome everyone to another episode of Living Out Loud with your host, Jess Phillips. Today I want to talk about criticism. So giving constructive criticism, taking criticism, receiving criticism, whether you're on the receiving end of that or you're trying to find ways to be able to confidently give feedback a little bit more positively or constructively. This episode is going to be for you. So let's talk about receiving criticism, because that is something that I was never very good at, can still struggle with. I mean, I don't know how many people love, let's be polite and call it constructive feedback rather than criticism, because I don't really know anybody on the planet who's like, yeah, for sure, criticize me, tell me what's up. But mine was bad before. Like, there was a hypersensitivity to, even looking back, things that weren't actually criticism, because I was feeling so insecure inside and I was so unsure of myself that even the slightest pinch of criticism would haunt me for days, and I could ruminate on it for quite a long time. I can't really remember, when I was a kid, and I say this with love because I tell my clients this all the time, that I do believe that two things can be very true at the same time. I grew up in a tough home, but also a loving home. I grew up with tough, critical parents, but also who can be very loving and supportive at the same time. So I try to stay out of the black and white territory when I think back to some of these experiences, because I don't want to paint a totally negative picture. But in all honesty, my dad is very British and very sarcastic, and I do thank him for my sense of humor, because our humor is very similar, except my dad was the king of roasting, and he would roast you. It was very funny when it was happening to somebody else, but when it was directed at me, it was tough. It was really tough. So I grew up with a lot of that, and it seemed like it was a very weird experience. If my family and I were to hang out one-on-one, that wouldn't really seem to happen. But as soon as you put us in a room all together, it was like, put on your bulletproof vest, because shots are flying and somebody is getting made fun of. And it was really just kind of all I knew. And you would think that that would probably, it's given me a thicker skin today, but you would think it would probably make me a little more thick-skinned when it came to other people roasting me or criticism headed my way, but it really didn't. I was very, very, very sensitive, and I used to be called sensitive as a kid, and it would drive me fucking crazy, and then I would get sensitive about being called sensitive, so it was kind of a lose-lose across the board. Let's talk about it. I read something the other day that said something along the lines of a judgment or a comment can only hurt you to the level that you believe that in yourself. And I was like, whoa, 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 hold the phone here. Because it's very true, right? If someone says to me, which they never would, but if someone says, hey, you look a bit off or puffy in that sweater, oh my God, I would die if somebody said that to me. But let's just use that as an example. If somebody said, like, oh, you look a bit thick in that sweater, I would crumble if I already thought I looked a bit thick in that sweater. Actually, I went shopping the other day with a very good friend of mine, and we were having a great time and laughing, and I put on this like really thick cable knit sweater in Simon's and these killer jeans, which I ended up buying. But he looked at me and he was like, babe, drop the sweater. And like that was his way of acknowledging I knew it didn't look great. It just didn't look great. And that's okay. But also the way that he said it was perfect because he just knew it wasn't the sweater for me. It wasn't doing me any favors. And he said, babe, just drop it. So I dropped it. That's a perfect way of delivering constructive criticism or feedback. But we all know we don't live in a world that everybody is emotionally intelligent enough to be able to do that. So let's not focus on that example. Anytime somebody would poke fun at me in the past, and I have a lot of funny friends, and I think when you're surrounded by people with a strong sense of humor, yeah, some of that humor is going to be sarcasm. It's going to be poking fun, lovingly, let's hope, at people. But any of my weaker spots, if those were to get commented on, it was pretty bad. But I thought about what I read the other day, and it's very true because let's say, for example, I just cut my hair and I think that it looks quite cute. And I'm strutting around and I like my cute little short haircut. And someone comes up to me and says, did you cut your hair? You know those comments that are just like kind of like those underlying side comments? Did you cut your hair? I'd be like, yeah, I cut it. I love it. They're like, oh, yeah, I like it. If I already love it, then if the other person doesn't love it, it's not going to sting as much. But if I'm walking down the street and I hate my haircut and someone comes up to me and says, oh, did you cut your hair? That one's going to cut deep. It's going to cut deep. So when we're talking about criticism, the first place I would start is really ask yourself, do you hold that belief already? And think about that, do you hold that belief already? If someone says, and let's hope nobody says this, I just can't think of any kind of middle of the road, neutral-ish comments, but let's say somebody says like, you're not too smart, are you? If you don't think you're smart, that's going to send you into a tailspin. But if somebody said that to me, I think I'm decently intelligent. So if somebody said, you're not too smart, I really wouldn't think anything about it because I don't hold that belief already. So when it comes to criticism, ask yourself, what are you most sensitive around? I've always been open and honest on this podcast or creating content. Mine, and it sounds very ego-filled. It is very ego-filled, and I really wish I didn't have it, but it's vanity for me. I don't know if I grew up in such a vain home because I like my insides. I really do. I think I'm smart. I think I'm funny. I think I have a great personality. I'm not saying that in a cocky way. I make friends easily. I can make people laugh. I know all the insides are there, but my God, have I been at war with the outsides my entire life. And it gets a bit exhausting. Like I wish I could just, press record. I'm actually recording these podcasts with no video for once in my life. And this is my second one today. And I'm like, oh, fuck, this is way easier. But I also need the video to put clips on social media. So anyways, whatever. We're doing no video today. That's fine. But that's really where the bulk of my criticism lies, is in these vain old ideas of myself. And I was just saying this to a friend this morning, and it's really sad because I was watching a video that I did just last September. And I was like, well, you were so cute last September. And I remember recording that video in September and not feeling good. So I'm like, oh, are you just going to do this your entire life until you're 60 and look back and be like, oh, girl, you should have been a little bit more grateful for what you had in the moment. But such is life. I'm working on it. But really think to yourself, okay, Where do you hold the most critical thoughts? So maybe yours is like mine and it's around your looks, your body, your weight. Maybe for others, it's their shyness, their inability to execute. Maybe they feel very critical towards the opinions of others because they've grown up with a very critical parent. So really find out and write down a couple of your sore spots, right? Think about when you look in the mirror, when you talk to yourself, your self-talk, what does that sound like? And get that down on paper. And that would be a great place to start to work on objectively how you can start receiving. I'm going to call it constructive criticism because just criticism, I don't think anybody's going to be able to receive very well. It's just not very nice to hear. And let's hope we're not giving it too often. But on the few, random times that you do, or maybe a boss needs to speak to you, or your partner says, hey, when you do this, it really makes me feel sad or rejected or whatever it is. Let's get clear on the beliefs that we're holding about ourselves first. Also, too, so that we don't project back onto others. I didn't realize how much of my life I was spending really projecting how I felt about myself onto other people. And I didn't even know that I was doing it at the time. If I was that critical towards myself, how would it be possible for me to be super loving towards others? I grew up in such a solution-focused home. If you had a problem, there was a solution being thrown at it. It was not, which is not a terrible thing because it's made me very solution focused and action oriented today, but it wasn't great for my feelings. There was no room at all for, hey, how do you feel about this? How did that experience make you feel? Are you scared? Do you need to talk? Right? So I just became this doer that was just gonna do a bunch of shit until I didn't feel bad on the inside anymore. And unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way. There has to be a time where we stop and pause and clean out that garbage can, essentially. Otherwise, I didn't want to continue to walk around the world being as sensitive as I was. Plus, it was being masked with a very, albeit falsely confident exterior. So it was even doubly as confusing for people because I looked quite confident and that I could hold my own, but on the inside, I was way more sensitive than I let out to be. So yeah, let's get on where that criticism comes from and the critical thoughts that we have towards ourselves, so that the next time somebody does say something, we get to say, wait a minute. Did I already feel that way about myself before coming into this meeting or this relationship or whatever it is? Because you can never hurt me as much as I already hurt myself. So I really needed to clean up a lot of that self-talk. And next, let's talk about delivering criticism. This was another thing that I was not great at because I didn't realize that I was walking around with a nuclear weapon on my shoulder. And nobody had a filter in my home growing up. So if my dad just wanted to say something, he would just say it. And again, he meant it with really good intention, but man, it cuts deep. It hurts. It hurts. We need a little bit of padding on the stuff that we're delivering. That pink stuff that goes in the walls? We need that around ourselves. We need a little bit of emotional insulation before. Sometimes if the situation calls for it, yes, we can just call a spade, but especially if it comes to delivering something a little bit more sensitive, I needed to learn how to be a little bit more delicate and not this, kind of aggressive bull in a china shop approach, because that wasn't great for anybody's feelings either. And it wasn't really fair that just because I grew up experiencing that I would, speak to people that way. So once I started to soften inside and I started to do the work, I became less critical of others. And also too, pain and experiences, in my opinion, make you a lot more compassionate. For example, when people used to talk to me about chronic pain when I was in my 20s, I would literally, probably not at them, but in my head, roll my eyes. And I'm like, oh my God, get over yourself with your chronic pain. I had no room for it. I really wasn't allowed to complain or be sick or get any sympathy that way growing up. So when other people started to do it, I just really to be honest, and it sounds really shitty saying it out loud right now, but I'm not there anymore, so that's okay. I really saw it as weakness. And I was like, you're going to let chronic pain stop you from living your life? Like, how bad is this pain? Like, I really just had no empathy for it at all. And then, I don't know if this is karma, but lo and behold, my shoulder went and I had 5 years of the worst chronic pain I have ever experienced in my life. Tried to do everything except for surgery. I don't know, really don't know why. I had never had surgery before, so I guess I was just scared or stubborn, or I really just thought like if I start working out more or if I start strengthening opposing muscles that the shoulder is going to heal. I did acupuncture, Chinese medicine, physio, dry needling. Dry needling is wild if anybody's ever tried it or wants to try it. It's really freaky. I tried just about everything. I couldn't sleep. I mean, I'm still not a great sleeper, but I couldn't sleep at all at the time. And I remember I was living in Toronto and I would just walk up and down the street at night because lying in my bed made me feel like I was going to lose my mind. And my shoulder it was the most dull, gnawing pain. And one time I remember waking up in the middle of the night and it was frozen, complete frozen shoulder, couldn't move it, couldn't put a shirt on, couldn't do anything. And I thought, okay, this is it. I'm driving myself to the hospital, which I never did before. I just don't like hospitals at all. But I just didn't know what to do. And I sat in the emergency room by myself and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then finally a doctor saw me and he was like, okay, well, have you gotten an ultrasound done yet? And I was like, no. And he was like, okay, well, you need to get an ultrasound and an x-ray done and then come back, or then we can treat it, but we don't really know what's wrong with it yet. And he goes, I'll give you a prescription for Percocets for now. And it was like one of those fork in the road moments where I was like, in my head, I was like, buddy, if you give me a prescription for Percocets right now, I'm going to be on the front page of the Toronto Star in about 2 weeks on the most wild relapse you've ever seen. I said, listen, I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic. I'm in sobriety. I don't remember how long I was sober back then, but I said, you can't give me these. This is not going to work. So he sent me to the pharmacy to get extra strength Tylenol. And I remember feeling so defeated. And I was like, what is this Tylenol going to do for me? Anyways, long story short, I was in chronic pain for 5 years before I had 2 separate shoulder surgeries. I'm no longer in pain anymore, thank God. But I have a new understanding, compassion, and empathy for people who are in chronic pain. So I think a lot of our criticism or our judgments also come from things maybe we haven't yet experienced. I mean, some people have the beautiful ability, and I have it now, thank God, to just understand that pain is pain, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain. I think as humans, we all know how painful pain can feel. So we don't necessarily need to have the exact same experience as someone, but we all know what suffering feels like. Anyways, I had to learn through kind of suffering in my own way to really be less tough on myself. And the softer I got with myself, the softer I was able to be with other people. And I started to understand this idea of stuckness, and I used to pride myself on not being stuck and just getting things done. But no matter what, I think we all hit this area in our life where we just feel stuck. We know what we should be doing, that famous should word, but just for whatever reasons, we just can't do it yet. And I think it's important to stay soft on ourselves during those times so that we can stay soft on others as well. But I'm getting way off track. Let's get to the point here. Delivering criticism to someone else. I learned, I don't know if it's the sandwich technique or the burger technique, whatever, it doesn't really matter. All you need is 2 buns or 2 pieces of bread and the meat in the middle to deliver constructive criticism or feedback. So a really helpful technique that I learned was the top bun is always going to be starting off with something positive. The meat in the middle, or the veggie patty for you weird vegetarians, is going to be the criticism or the feedback, and the bottom bun is going to be closing with something positive and loving again. And at first, I kind of thought it was silly when I first heard about this technique. And then I started practicing it and I was like, oh shit, this really works. So what it looks like is, say you want to talk to a friend that hurt your feelings at a party the week before. Hey, so-and-so, can I speak to you about something? And let's say you get their permission and you're having the talk. The top bun would be, hey, so-and-so, I really value you and our friendship, right? And the person's like, yeah, of course. So now you've started soft. You haven't started with a nuclear weapon on your shoulder, because when we go in too hard, or we go in with ego, or we go in with too much of our own criticism, or our claws are already out, more often than not, the other person is probably going to shut down, or they're going to get super defensive themselves. So you go in with the top bun, nice, soft, squishy. I really value our friendship, right? Right. But I wanted to tell you, last week when you were poking fun at me about X, Y, and Z, it really embarrassed me and it really hurt my feelings in front of the other people there. But I'm telling you this because I want our friendship to work and I want to be in each other's lives for a long time to come. So it's like soft, a little harder, closing soft again. And I've used it in business. I've used it in relationships. I've used it in friendships. I try to use it with my parents. It works. It really, really works because people have egos. It just is what it is. And we have a lot of our own sensitivities and our own preconceived ideas and judgments that we have towards ourselves. So when somebody has something serious to talk to us about, or that we've, hurt somebody's feelings, it can be a lot if we already are walking around with all of that sensitivity. So that's the best way that I have learned to deliver criticism to someone else. I mean, also all of these techniques, and especially that sandwich technique, is used for people that you care about, right? I haven't really touched on this in this episode, but if you feel like you have somebody in your life who is constantly criticizing you, or is just super rude, or is malicious, or making fun of you to get a reaction from others, this is all abusive behavior. So I wouldn't use any of these techniques with an abuser. I'll do a whole separate episode on narcissistic abuse and all of that coming up for the launch of my new ebook, where I'll really explain the difference between teasing and malicious behavior and how you can kind of recognize the difference between those two. But these techniques are really for people that you love in your life, or your friends, or you want to be able to ask your boss for something, or ask for more money or a raise or time off, or whatever it is really just getting a little bit more confident, clearing your side of the street too, because I never realized how much of my own thoughts and my own judgments were really holding me back, because more often than not, I was the only person thinking that. Like I remember when I used to ask for time off or say what I needed or whatever, my God, I'd be in my head about it for a week and I'd be having these arguments back and forth and how the other person's going to respond to what I'm asking for. And then the day would come and I would ask for it and they'd be like, okay, sure. And I'm like, okay, sure. That didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. So really just, check yourself, check your old limiting beliefs, check how much you're criticizing yourself first. Get those down, talk to somebody about those, and then experience hopefully a little bit more freedom walking around in the world, because again, the softer you get on yourself, the softer you're going to get on others. I hope this episode was helpful. Please leave a comment, let me know. As always, DM me, private message me any topics that you would like me to air or to talk about, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye. Thanks everyone for listening and supporting Living Out Loud. Be sure to tune in next week for another fun, juicy episode.